The only people who don't want to disclose the truth are people with something to hide.
We begin tonight, unfortunately, with the lie that won't die. MSNBC political analyst David Corns, the Washington Bureau Chief, or he is the Washington Bureau Chief for Mother Jones. And Joan Walsh is with Salon.com. Well, here's former Governor Mike Huckabee on a radio program run by Steve Maltzberg. Let's listen to what he said on Monday.
Don't you think it's fair also to ask him, I know your stance on this, how come we don't have a health record? We don't have a college record. We don't have a birth certificate. Why, Mr. Obama, did you spend millions of dollars in courts all over this country to defend against having to present a birth certificate? It's one thing to say, you've seen it, goodbye. But why go to court and send lawyers to defend against having to show it? Don't you think we deserve to know more about this man?
I would love to know more, but what I know is troubling enough. And one thing that I do know is his having grown up in Kenya. His view of the Brits, for example, very different than the average American.
David, is he lying? Is he a buffoon or what? Where do you come up with a guy who was a former governor of a state who's been in national politics for a number of years now, can read the newspaper as well as the rest of us, knows that Barack Obama grew up in Hawaii. He went to the best prep school out there in Honolulu, went to Occidental, went to Columbia, went to Harvard Law, ran for a number of offices. We know all about the guy, and here he is sucking up to a guy who's implying we don't know anything about the guy, his health records, his college records, his birth certificate. He's playing to the birthers that the President of the United States is some kind of imposter. Why is Mike Huckabee, playing this game?
You know, he is in the middle of the transmission belt of trash. You know, Fox News is sort of the ground zero of that. And, you know, he has a show there. All this stuff about Barack Obama, you know, not just being born in Kenya, but being influenced by his father, who he didn't know, into believing, you know, as a good Kenyan word, that the Brits are terrible. I mean, this is all coming from Dinesh D'Souza. It was in a Forbes magazine a few months ago. Newt Gingrich was talking it up on Fox News. I think Mike Huckabee is just immersed in those trashy, dirty waters, and he's just absorbing, maybe by osmosis. And you know, I was reading. I'll give him a plug here. I was reading his book, Mike Huckabee, A Simple Government, and in the first few pages, he says he's not going to be involved in personal attacks on the president, and the key thing that we need is integrity. Well, he's showing none of that in this episode. He is lying about the fact that he meant to say what he said.
Well, we know what he said. We know why he said it. Let's go into this, Joan. I always thought that everybody in the media who spent a lot of time with Huckabee, and I've had pretty good experiences with him. I don't know why. I thought he was a good guy, basically, even if he's a man of the sort of evangelical right.
Right.
And there he is smearing this guy. Here he is engaging in what we call in our religion false witness, suggesting that he's some kind of Mau Mau guy who grew up in Kenya, rooting for the Mau Maus against the Brits. He never spent a day of his youth in Kenya, a day. And he's made this whole story up. Here he is, by the way, to give it the full fill before you react. This isn't like he misspoke. Well, I meant to say this and I said that. I meant to say Indonesia and I accidentally said Kenya. Here he is with the full bore of this thing on the Steve Maltzberg show. Here he is talking about a bust of Winston Churchill and how he hates the British. Let's listen. It's a whole number he's got here.
Right.
When he gave the bust back to
Winston Churchill,
Churchill, a great insult to the British. But then if you think about it, his perspective as growing up in Kenya with a Kenyan father and grandfather, their view of the Mau Mau revolution in Kenya is very different than ours because he probably grew up hearing that the British were a bunch of imperialists who persecuted his grandfather.
He despises the West. He despises the Brits, and I think he could take it all out on Israel, and that's why he despises Israel.
Okay, I don't have time for Maltzberg. I don't even know this guy, Joan. You can shake your head because I'm giving up shaking my heads about these guys. He didn't grow up. He isn't rooting for the Mau Maus. He wasn't out there. He wasn't a headhunter or any of the crap they're trying to sell.
Right.
And none of this is true. Completely. And there's Huckabee, a man with some education, playing the game. It's one thing to be a rube. It's another one to pretend you're a rube and to play to the rubes. It's really hard to buy this, that he's a good guy in doing this. Your thoughts, Joan?
Well, he definitely tries to act like he is the good guy. He's kind of the Smurfy Republican. He defended Michelle Obama last week when Sarah Palin was attacking her healthy eating crusade. But, this is dirty stuff. Like David says, that he swims in the polluted waters of all of this right-wing paranoia about the president. Just to take one thing out of that, we did not give the bust of Winston Churchill back. He moved it to the residence, and he put Lincoln in its place. Now, can you imagine if he kicked out Lincoln to put in a European leader? He'd be a Europhile. They'd be attacking him for that. So that's one thing. The other thing
I guess we would have put, following this narrative, he would have put Jomo Kenyatta there. I mean, not that I actually look up to Jomo Kenyatta myself as an African liberation leader, but
also,
of course I'm a liberal, and there's something wrong with that too. Go ahead.
Can't we all say that we're all anti-colonialists now? I mean, that first
I thought
of all,
we were.
Apparently not.
Americans fought colonialism.
The right side?
By the way, the premise of this is frightening, David and Joan. It's frightening. He's saying that somehow because he does have some sort of ancestral notion that colonialism is wrong. By the way, I was in the Peace Corps in Africa. I don't think colonialism was entirely evil, but it was basically bad to go into another country, take it over, shoot anybody who got in your way, run the place. That's basically bad.
Chris, here's the code. Here's the code. After he said what he said, we heard the little clip there. The radio guy goes on to say, Obama despises the West. That's what this really is about. They don't care about what he thinks about Kenya and freedom and independence in Africa. It's about he despises Israel and the West. And what does Mike Huckabee say to that? Absolutely nothing. This is all about reaffirming this notion that he's not one of us. Not only is he not one of us, he hates us, and he wants to do evil and harm to the United States, to the West. And that's why this is so odious. And for Mike Huckabee not to call this guy out shows just how low he's gone in terms of pandering to the far right.
Well, there's the question, I have to say, and I want to get back to the roots of this, because it is about roots. I mean, we are a country of immigrants. I'm only 2 generations in and about you guys. My grandmother and grandfather from the British Isles, not that exotic, but not from here. and a lot of us have, in fact, most of the people I work with and know have parents and grandparents from another country. It's America. We're based upon the idea of being a land of immigrants. But we don't go back and say, well, I know where you're coming from because your grandfather's from Russia. Therefore, you don't like this or that, or you're still fighting the czar. I mean, we don't talk like that. We sort of let people be themselves. The great thing about America, the true American exceptionalism, we say, I don't give a damn who your grandfather was. I want to know if you can play the game. I don't know if you can deliver. I want to know if you can be my doctor. I want to know if you can win the Academy Award. That's the wonder of this country. Or you can become president. We don't care if your grandfather rooted for the Mau Maus. But here's this guy, Maltzberg, and I don't even know. I want to talk about him. This guy, Huckabee, we're going to have to put it on. He's leading the Republican polls now in our latest poll. He's not some character off stage we're beating up here tonight. He's some guy who may well be the Republican nominee for president. And he walks out there and starts talking like this in the world. I think it's going to shake the world. There he is, 25%. Joan.
The other thing that's so amazing and that does, I'm sorry, feel racial about this is that nobody ever talks about Barack Obama's white grandparents or mother. No one's ever looking at.
Oh, you mean the guy that fought for Patton? No.
Right.
We don't want to talk about a guy that fought in the European
the
theater
World War
against
II
Hitler.
Hero. Or how about his grandmother, who was a bank executive? Nobody talks about how those values influenced Barack Obama. Nobody talks about his white mother, who is in fact probably more influential, far more influential than his father. She raised him. She was an anthropologist. She had a great global view of the world. But we don't even talk about her because that would remind us all that he's got roots in Kansas.
We know why.
I'm going to call it what it is. I say, damn this point of view. Damn this point of view. What is he supposed to do? You come to this country, you raise a kid, rather, she married somebody from Africa, his mother. The kid goes to high school, does great in high school. He gets into these great schools like Occidental and the Columbia College in New York. He gets into Harvard Law. He doesn't go out and make $1 billion. He goes back and helps the people, the poor people in Chicago. He goes into public life. He loves America. He believes in democracy, what it can achieve, what government can do for people. He's done every single thing. He's kept his nose clean. He's done nothing wrong. And yet they trounce him. They go after him with a vengeance because he looks different. He has a different name. Isn't that what it's an ethnic attack? Isn't that what it's really about, David?
There is no other president or even major presidential candidate who's ever gotten this type of illegitimate scrutiny. There are a lot of
false witness.
What do we call? I mean, insulting. I mean, there were critics of George Bush and Dick Cheney who came up with all sorts of conspiracy theories. And the presidents come under harsh attack. But not under the type of attack that there's somebody really different than who they are, that they're Manchurian candidates, that the color of their skin is dictating their beliefs, that they're genetically predisposed to hate the West. I mean, that's what the argument is here. He has a DNA. He has an anti-American gene. And that's because he's black.
You know why? Because we all grew up in a schoolyard with kids who made fun of other kids because they were different, had a different ethnic background. Yeah. We always put up with them. Some of them grew up and got better when they got older. Now we got a guy talking like one of those kids in the schoolyard, leading the Republican pack for the nomination. It's scary, and I hope the rest of the world's not paying attention to Mike Huckabee. Anyway, David Corn, it's great to have you on. As always, John Walsh, you've got good hearts. This isn't about ideology. It's about bearing false witness. It's in the Bible. Check it out, Huckabee.
The only people who don't want to disclose the truth are people with something to hide.